It convenient to approach the Federal High Court in ensuring the detention of Omoyele Sowore for more than 50 days, but has since comfortably refused to comply with the order of the same court directing the release of citizen Omoyele Sowore.
Joining us now to dissect Sowore's court proceedings and DSS conduct so far is a public affairs analyst and legal practitioner, Mr. Liborous Oshoma. Welcome to the show this morning.
My pleasure.
Now, 6 days after, we're still here. They've asked Sowore to be released, and then we're still getting pushback from the DSS. Do you believe that this is the administration's persistent disobedience of the court is an act of lawlessness, or there's some other explanation?
There's basically no explanation for it. The only explanation we can deduce from this is the statement made by the chief law officer of the state, the legal advisor to the federal government, the Attorney General of the Federation, Ambassador, Malami SN, that somebody, in his words, I'm trying to recouch his words now, that somebody who contested an election and lost, that was calling for a revolution, and that, so with that, the only inference one can draw is the fact that they really didn't want to go to courts. They wanted to use arbitrary power to arrest him and keep him, even though they mouthed rule of law. But while mouthing rule of law, they also surreptitiously told you that national security should take preeminence over rule of law, forgetting that the court decides what is national security. And so now they want to decide what national security should be. There will be the accuser, there will be the judge, there will be the jury, and then the jailer. And unfortunately, we seems to be divided. Opinion seems to be divided on this issue. Some people who do not like Sowore's face, believe because he campaigned against their, quote and unquote, God then, Goodluck Jonathan, so he should suffer the consequences. But they forget that we're talking about rule of law here. We're talking about arbitrariness. And so if it happens to Sowore today and nobody says anything, that means it can happen to anybody tomorrow. Including political parties, they also should be wary. Because all you need tomorrow is to say, well, some politicians or Atiku, he's made certain comments that threatens national security. And then they just keep them, even if the court grants bail, they will look for opportunity not to release him.
I mean, a lot of people will say that the strong point on the rule of law and the federal government not obeying court orders has always been in the front burner. Would you say the judiciary is independent, truly independent in this day and age? And I'm saying that on the heels of the reconvening of the courts recently, and the Chief Justice of the country saying that the judiciary will be independent. It will not take orders from any other, sector of government. It will stand firm and it will stand resolute. All right. Tango Mohammed did say that, and he said that strongly. But when this is happening, how would you juxtapose that with the independence of the judiciary?
I would not want to paint the judiciary in one brush because there are so many judges out there, in spite of the provocation, who are busy daily, raising their heads high, in upholding the sanctity of the rule of law. And in spite of intimidation and threat also, we also saw what Justice Taiwo did, even though initially some of us disagreed with him. And so there are so many like that, so many names I don't want to mention here. But, in another breath also, there are some also who have been threatened and who have been cowed by the same government. Not just this government, it didn't start today, successive government. The attitude of our government at the center, even at the state level, this military mentality of believing that the king can do no wrong. And so nobody should query the king. And so if court gives orders against state governors or presidents, then there is a problem. You hear some governors quarreling, why will the chief judge, grant an order against a state governor? If you remember in Merufai's book, The Accidental Public Servant, he did say, when he assumed office and he knew that he was going to revoke, so many C of O's, that the first thing he did was to summon all the judges in the FCT High Court, and then they had an understanding that they were not going to grant frivolous restraining orders against the FCT government. And so it is that what we are just seeing is a carryover of what has been. It's just that, this government had taken it to a very high, unreasonable level that it is very conspicuous and obvious. That's why people are shouting as if it's,
Because a lot of people will tell you that the case of Dansuki is still there.
Yes.
Now Sowore is still there. Dansuki has not been granted bail. Sowore is still there. A lot of other people too will cite the case of Olisame too. Yeah,
what I am saying here is that, in agreeing with you, is that this trend has started long ago. You remember those days when a court will give order, if you remember, Obasanjo, when the Supreme Court did say release funds meant for Lagos State government. They said they were studying the judgment. The then Attorney General at some point said, well, they will obey. In some cases, you hear the Attorney General saying, we will obey. And I ask myself, is it in your mouth to say you won't obey in the first place? You hear the government will say, we are studying the judgment. And so what you have now is a carryover of those practices. Now, these ones don't even study. They either tell you that we have not seen a copy, even when there is, a document endorsed, stating the endorsement. Or they will tell you, well, we have seen it, but we will appeal. They will tell you, you remember the Kaduna State government on Ezazaki's case.
From coming
they would have collected a copy, like in Sowore's case, they collected a copy, received a copy, endorsed. And then 2 days later, they said because they have not received a copy. Meanwhile, when the ruling was delivered, they had a lawyer in court. And so they said they had not received a copy. In Merufai's case, on Ezazaki's matter, the government said they will appeal. As if your intention to appeal acts as a stay of execution of a valid court order. So that's what you have now, that a situation where, and then you see supporters of government, people who should know, who should be angry at being oppressed, will tell you, well, the government has said they want to appeal, so what do you want them to do? Including lawyers. You now begin to wonder if truly we are looking at the positions of our laws, or we're just supporting politicians blindly.
Okay, so we are seeing what the problems are here. And I want to just quickly compare it to the recent ruling that happened in the House of Parliament in the UK, where the Supreme Court came and said, you know what, this suspension is lawless. And even though Boris Johnson did not agree with it, he strongly disagreed with it. He said, you know what, I am going to obey it. So we see a system that works. We now know that these people are not obeying the rule of law. What can be done in this case? Now, to just buttress that, the Federal High Court has threatened that they're going to jail the DSS DG if the orders set to free Sowore are not obeyed. Is that a move in the right direction?
At the end of the day, who will execute the order? Who will execute the order? Because ordinarily, when a court gives an order, and that order is not obeyed, the court has inherent power to protect its order by, issuing bench warrants, in violation of court order, either in the face of the court or outside the court. But here, when such orders are given, irrespective of who is involved, if you have an independent policing, those orders immediately are carried out. And that's why you would hear, take the case of the Prime Minister of Great Britain that you cited, where an advisor or a policeman will say, well, I owe allegiance to the state and not you. But here, all allegiance are owed to the president or the governor. And so that is why we need to look at the body language of Mr. President or the Mr. Governor before, certain actions are taken, whether by the police commissioner or the IG of police. And so when you have, such a lame duck approach or institutions to issues, others are obeyed, others are observed in breach, than obedience to these orders. And then these orders become paper tiger upon which they are written. And so that's why, but it's a dangerous trend. And what we should do as a people, Sowore did call for a protest because things are not, working as they should be. Not because the government didn't promise. Asking the same government to fulfill the promises that they made. Fulfilling the promise that you made has become a problem now. The man used the word revolution. But they forget also that there's only a limit to how far the people can take. If the incidents of ShopRite's raids, in Lagos, if somebody had told you in your widest imagination that youths will spontaneously, carry out such an action, you wouldn't have believed. And so for people that are keeping quiet, believing that you drive SUVs, you live in the posh areas, for all of us keeping quiet today, you might be surprised. Don't be surprised in, the nearest future when all of us will be branded as enemies of these same people, because there is so much hunger in the land. And then for our elections, it is also very critical, both the politicians and the followers. Let's not go back to our bed after election. The end of one election cycle is the beginning of another one. This is time for people to start galvanizing for the next election. The politicians, the active politicians, are already discussing to 2023. Okay. Why the passive ones are forgotten that they contested for election. Okay. And so, quickly. And so when you put all of this in the mix, this is the only way you can have people who have respect for the rule of law, in the saddle. But when you have those who do not have respect for the rule of law and you expect them to change the position of the law as it is, it will be very difficult.
I want us to talk very strongly about institutions, carrying out court orders. And I'll segue that into the point Shaitan raised. In the UK, once the Supreme Court passed that order, the Prime Minister didn't even need to say anything. He didn't even need to say anything. In fact, it was the Speaker of the Parliament that came and said, we are reconvening 11:30 a.m. tomorrow. So, before even Femi Falana goes to the DSS, isn't the DSS willing to say, Femi Falana, please come and perfect this man bail quickly. We are ready to give him up as long as the court order.
The moment the court order was granted, it was given, it was no longer in the mouth of the DSS to ask for perfection. It is the courts that all the perfection you need to do would be in the court. Because when we're perfecting bail, it is when the court gives an order, those orders are perfected in court, and then the registrar would verify that all conditions have been met. And then you give instruction that for the man to be released. And then, even if you look at the provisions of Section 32, 1, 2, and 3 of the Administration of Criminal Justice Act, even when a person is arrested by the security operatives, the court has the powers to ask that such person be produced. A person that has not been charged, the court has the power to ask that such person be produced, and then when that person is produced, the court has the power to review the offense for which he is arrested and then grant him bail. And once he's granted bail, once the conditions are met, you can no longer be saying, oh, we want to receive the order, we don't want to receive the order. In the UK, in America, and in Senate society, these are places where the law works, where institutions work, where you have security operatives that are ready, that owes their allegiance to the state and not to an individual. But here, what you have are security operatives that owns their allegiance to the individuals. This morning, somewhere at another platform, I discussed, the powers of the president vis-a-vis that of the governor in Nigeria. And so you find out that these powers are so enormous that, he appoints, he hires and fires at will, subject to advice from some persons of the National Assembly.
Keep us up to speed on what's happening to Agba Jalingo.
Yes, it's so sad. It's very unfortunate in this country. The same thing you see play out at the national level is even worse at the state level. That's why, for those of us in Lagos, we are lucky. We're privileged, we criticize government and nothing happens. You can't try it in some states. You are either killed under questionable circumstances, or just now that you have, the center is showing how to disobey court orders. They'll just keep you in the cooler, with the aid of a sitting commissioner of police. And these are people who will tell you tomorrow during the election that, oh, look, we want state police because commissioners of police don't take orders from us. The case of Agba Jalingo is very pathetic in the sense that Agba Jalingo was the one that called us and said, look, we can't just be fixated at the center. There's need for some of us to go back to our states and begin to mirror what the state governors are doing. And so to that extent, he was one very vociferous guy who campaigned vigorously for the current governor, Ben Ayade. But unfortunately, after the governor came on board, there were issues. And Agba Jalingo felt, look, I can't just keep quiet. After campaigning for a government, I also need to mirror that government. I remember going to Calabar and I called him and I said, you talk so much about this man, but all I can see are billboards. There's nothing happening, kinetic crystallization and the rest. And then he said, don't worry, I would, when the governor does well, we'll give him, credit. But any time he misbehaves, we'll give him knocks. And so there was this issue of 500 million naira that microfinance bank funds, that he did raise an alarm and said, look, the government mismanaged this fund. It started from when the president extended autonomy to local government and said, look, their funds will go directly to them, So there were calls to him to retract that story. And he refused. He said, well, the worst you can do is to sue me if you feel there's, the story is not true. And then he got an invitation from the police in Cross River. While preparing to go honor the invitation on a Tuesday, on a Friday evening, they came to his residence in Lagos and bundled him back to Calabar. And then from that time, they kept him in Communicado, kept him in a facility.
How many days has he been there now for now?
Agua Jalingo had been there for close to 40 days now, if not mistaken. Immediately, almost after Sowore. And then because I visited him, and so from the feelers I got was that that was when he was in that facility, that they were negotiating with him. This I can say on an international platform, that they were discussing with him, that he should sign a memorandum of understanding that he would stop criticizing the government, and then they would give him money. And he said, no, my conscience would allow me to do this. I wasn't doing it because I am hungry. What I want is that money that you want to give me, you can use it to provide good governance. So when the heat became too much, they had to hurriedly charge him before a federal high court for treason, for malicious publications against the governor, similar to, and then for relationship with Sowore, planning to bring down the government of Nigeria, and all of that. And so the matter came up last week, but the court didn't see this. Coming up again tomorrow. And so, for me, in all of this, it's journalists in Nigeria, especially the vociferous one, are gradually becoming an endangered species. We've never seen it this way, even though, there were times when journalists were randomly picked up or newspaper houses were shut down for publishing negative stories. But the rate at which this government is going, you see governors borrowing a leave from the government at the center. So if they violate court order, and then you can also do it at the state level. Even the State House of Assemblies are appendages of the executive governors. And so that's why nothing really would happen. And the only hope that we have as a people in Nigeria is to clamor for the independence of the judiciary. And then also we, the people, should learn to know our rights and insist on them irrespective of the position we find ourselves.
Let's move back to the Sowore case. Let's talk about, the future of this case. They are still going to appeal this. I mean, Sheita, you wanted to ask the question?
Yes, I wanted to find, during the break, I was trying to find out that is this going to be an indefinite hold? Like we said, they've given the order, he should be released, even though they are going to appeal.
Let me tell you what is happening. This has nothing really to do with Sowore. If you don't know it now, this is a dress rehearsal to the event to come. Government is testing the waters on how far they can do this. So it's actually targeted as politicians. If they don't know, they should know now. And then, critics like us. And so that tomorrow government can ride roughshod on anybody. And you just be careful. You say, well, I don't want to be Sowore or Agba Jalingo. I don't want to be kept in custody, But they should forget also. They shouldn't forget also that the likes of Gani Fahimi, the good Femi Falana, Bekora, and some Kuti, at some point or the other, went to jail to fight for the democracy that they are enjoying today. People, unfortunately, some advocates of good governance are part of this government, and none of them is advising this government that the path that they are towing is not the right way to go for a nation like Nigeria. Abacha those days thought he could, once you raise your voice, it's either you are exterminated or you are kept in jail. But today, where's Abacha? I'm not proud that to see, the demise of any man. But people who jailed Nelson Mandela, today Nelson Mandela is celebrated worldwide, but nobody remembers their name. So what they are doing, actually, they are testing the water. How do we perpetuate ourselves in office? We saw it with the judiciary. We saw it with the sting operations on judges. Anybody that they see as somebody likely to raise their voice.
So sorry, quickly. Disagree with you and say fighting corruption as regards the sting operation on judges.
That's a different discussion altogether. Maybe someday would still visit all of those. And then you talk about these sting operations. And we saw Ganduje shed dollars in what do you call it, a stink video also. And what did the government say? What did the president say?
But going back to section 308 of the Constitution,
it can be investigated.
It can be investigated.
Was the matter even investigated at all?
But who brought it forward? Was he taken to court? Was an investigation set up against him?
Do you need to even petition EFCC to investigate the matter? Is such a matter that was brought to the notice of the president? Even people wrote petition.
But
what happened?
Was doctored.
The president, without investigation, said, Ganduje couldn't have done this.
But Ganduje claimed he was doctored.
Even Oshomole came out to tell us that the moment you join this party, those are not statements that should be coming from, unfortunately, from a national chairman of a party that is fighting corruption. You know, so let's not even go there, because
but
tomorrow...
But they will argue and say Dare is in jail.
Then let me tell you, do you know when Dare's case started? So when we get a drop out of this ocean, we shouldn't, beat our chest to say we have done much. What I'm saying is that the president can do more. This government can do so much. Tomorrow, don't be surprised. It's all they need now, all the government need now to silence you is to say, oh, this man is corrupt. And then everybody will shout hallelujah. He's corrupt. Is there nobody who's not corrupt in Nigeria? You know, I'm not saying don't fight corruption, but the best way to fight corruption should be plugging systemic loopholes. Well, talking about even the vice president's case now, there can be no smoke without fire. But in all of this, the government has said, oh, there is no problem, everything, all is well. The vice president has said, I will remove my cloak of immunity. But he doesn't have immunity of prosecution, from an investigation, sorry.
That's a talk
and so, bringing back this issue to Sowore's case, the DSS had said Sowore ought not to be granted bail, that being somebody who is standing trial for treasonable felony, and that he ought not to be granted bail. And I want to say it here today, that they should go and read section 161 of the Administration of Criminal Justice Act. It's a law that was passed in 2015 that they have, boasted has enhanced the administration of criminal justice. The judge, the bail, even for capital punishments, is at the discretion of the judge. Once exceptional circumstances like ill health can be proven. And then another thing they have succeeded in doing, for me, it's a threat. It's like a threat to a would-be judge who will eventually handle the matter to say, look, we will petition the NJC, or that we don't like the way this man... You don't do that for a matter that is in court. You can discuss the facts for public interest's sake, but not to begin to issue threats or to begin to sit on appeal as an appellate court over a matter that the judge had decided on. If you want to go on appeal, you are at liberty to file a notice of appeal and go argue your matter at the appellate court, why bail ought not to have been granted. But to resort to public opinion and begin to subtly threaten, a judge for carrying out his constitutional responsibility, for me, is an irresponsible act, outrageous display of irresponsibility of the highest order, coupled with the fact that you have intentionally and vexatiously refused to obey that said order. Meanwhile, you were the same person that went to that same court to ask for 90 days to keep him. And the court said, no, 90 days is too much, I'll give you 45 days. And after 45 days, you were so happy to tell the world that you are keeping him on the order of the courts. The same order, the same court now says, no, that order I gave you had expired. Allow him to go, but let him deposit his national passport. So since you have a charge against him, so in the event that you want to charge him, and then also release him to a responsible senior advocate, and you say you have not seen the charge. Just like what happened during the era of Goodluck Jonathan, where a sitting president of the Court of Appeal, the NJC, asked for a suspension, and on a Sunday, the president acted on it. But when the same NJC said, look, we have found nothing against him, reinstate him, they said the matter was in court. You see, government can be very funny in Nigeria. And then, unfortunately, some of these people, they leave government tomorrow, and then they want to claim sanctimony, sense, as if, because we all have a short memory, so we don't remember this thing. But lastly, this government should remember, like I always say, the precedent you set today, others, when you leave office, maximum is 8 years. When you leave office, others might use it against you or against people close to you.
All right, Liborous, as we wrap up, there are three arms of government: executive, legislature, and judiciary. Apparently, the executive is so powerful in this country. When are we going to have conversations about devolution of power from the executive as we wrap up in less than 1
I
minute.
told somebody this morning, I said those days when we discuss in government, when we discuss British Parliament, you said the British Parliament, not the British Prime Minister now, the British Parliament is so powerful that it can turn a man to a woman and a woman into a man. But unfortunately here, we don't discuss, when we discuss such powers, it's not in the Nigerian Parliament, it is in the president. The president of Nigeria is so powerful that he can turn a man to a woman and a woman into a man. But we need to begin, not, this set of people you have cannot change that. We need to go back to our electoral processes to be able to change that.
All right, thank you so much, Liborous Oshoma, for being here.